Have you ever wondered why millions of Muslims whisper one specific verse before they sleep? Why some claim it's the reason they haven't had nightmares in years? Or why entire homes feel different after it's spoken aloud? This isn't just a verse. It's a shield, a gatekeeper, a supernatural declaration that sends darkness fleeing. Stay with me, because what I'm about to show you might change the way you see spiritual protection forever. Ayat-ul-Kursi is unlike any other verse. It carries a weight in the spiritual world that even the most eloquent words cannot fully express. It is called the throne verse, and that alone should make us pause. Imagine that God's throne described in a single breathtaking verse. Every line radiates majesty. Every word echoes power. And yet, it's not just poetic. It's not just beautiful. It's a revelation that establishes who is really in control of this universe. And the reason Muslims around the world hold it so close, reciting it day and night, is because it reminds the soul of a truth deeper than anything the eyes can see, that God never sleeps, never forgets, and never loses sight of his creation. This verse begins not by talking about what we should do or how we should feel. It begins by lifting our eyes off ourselves and placing them where they belong, on the one who owns everything. The verse declares that he is ever living, self-sustaining, and beyond the reach of weakness or weariness. What that means is profound. It means that while human strength fades and leaders fall, the one who sits on the throne never changes, never declines, and never dies. This isn't just reassurance, it's foundation. It's something your spirit can stand on when everything else shakes. People wonder why this verse is seen as a shield, as a protection against evil. But the real reason it protects is because of who it reveals. When you say it, you are announcing to every corner of the unseen world, I belong to the one whose throne stretches over the heavens and the earth. I'm under his care, his authority, his watch. No evil, no fear, no anxiety can stand when that truth is declared with faith. And that's not superstition. That's not ritual. That's alignment. That's when your voice comes into agreement with the eternal power of God himself. What makes it more remarkable is how it describes his knowledge. Not a single leaf falls, not a breath escapes, not a whisper is spoken except that he knows. There's nothing happening in your life that he is unaware of. You're not forgotten. You're not overlooked. Even when you're silent and no one sees what you're carrying, he does. He knows the heartbreak behind the smile, the tears behind the silence. And this verse reminds you that the one who knows also cares, and he's never distant. The throne, as described here, is not a seat of judgment waiting to punish, but a symbol of complete sovereignty. There's no exhaustion in him, no delay, no sleep. That alone is comforting beyond words. Because we live in a world where people get tired of us, where help runs out, where even those we trust most fall short, but not him. You don't need to wake him up. You don't need to explain your pain in 1,000 ways. He knows, he sees, and he reigns. That's what Ayat-ul-Kursi speaks to the soul. Kathryn Kuhlman, though not from the Islamic faith, often spoke about the awe and the weight of God's presence. How everything changes when the reality of God becomes greater than the reality of our circumstances. That's the same atmosphere Ayat-ul-Kursi brings. When it's spoken with belief, the room shifts. Fear has to leave. Worry loses its grip. You remember who you're really covered by. And you don't just speak it for comfort. You speak it to reposition your heart back into alignment with the one who rules everything. And perhaps this is why so many believers don't go a day without it. It's not out of habit. It's not even out of tradition. It's because the soul needs to hear it again and again. God is still on the throne. He hasn't moved. He hasn't forgotten you. His throne isn't shaken by your problems. His power isn't limited by your circumstances. And if he's watching over the entire universe, he's certainly watching over you. So when a believer recites Ayat-ul-Kursi, it isn't a whisper into the dark. It's a declaration to the heavens and the earth that in a world filled with uncertainty, we serve a God whose power never fades, whose watchfulness never fails, and whose throne is never empty. That is why this verse is the beginning of every breakthrough. Let's talk about why Ayat-ul-Kursi is known as a shield, not just in metaphor, but in actual spiritual reality. You see, in the physical world, people lock their doors, install alarms, and put up barriers to feel safe. But in the unseen realm, where real battles are fought, the battles of fear, anxiety, evil whispers, and unseen forces, there are no locks that can protect you except the words rooted in divine truth. That's where Ayat-ul-Kursi becomes more than just a verse. It becomes a fortress. For centuries, Muslims have turned to this verse not only as part of prayer, but as a weapon against spiritual attack. Not a sword made of metal, but a weapon made of light, pure, clear, unbreakable light. The Prophet of Islam spoke of this verse as a protection from Shaitan, the adversary, the whisperer, the one who works in shadows. And that tells us something powerful. Evil doesn't fear loud noise. It doesn't fear big talk, but it does fear truth. It fears the presence of God. And when you speak Ayat-ul-Kursi, you're not just speaking words, you're inviting presence. You're calling on the one who never sleeps, never forgets, and never loses. Now think about that. Evil thrives in darkness. It feeds on fear. It hides where doubt lives. But Ayat-ul-Kursi exposes it all, like a floodlight pouring into a room that was hidden for too long. Kathryn Kuhlman often talked about how the presence of God could enter a space and change everything, not through drama, not through human force, but through quiet authority. That's the same kind of authority this verse carries. It doesn't shout, it doesn't scream, it simply announces who God is, and that's enough to silence every other voice. There's something unexplainable that happens when a believer whispers Ayat-ul-Kursi before sleep. The room feels different. A sense of calm settles in. That's not just psychological, that's spiritual. Because when you speak it, you're not just reciting, you're declaring alignment. You're saying, tonight, I will not rest in fear. I will rest under the throne of the one who sees all and protects all. It's like a spiritual key turning in a lock. Something closes to darkness. Something opens to peace. And it doesn't only apply at night. This verse is recited in homes, in cars, in hospital rooms, in moments of panic, before travel, when feeling weak, when sensing heaviness. Why? Because the soul remembers something the mind off, and forgets that safety does not come from circumstances. It comes from God, and Ayat-ul-Kursi is the voice of that safety. When people feel like they're under attack emotionally, mentally, spiritually, it's this verse that rises from their lips like a shield. And the shield isn't in the sound, it's in the truth. It's the truth that God does not tire, He does not sleep, He does not forget, and nothing can happen without His knowledge. That alone is enough to make fear let go of your mind and peace take over. This is why evil flees when it's recited. Because this verse reminds everything around you, seen and unseen, that you are not alone. You are not exposed. You are not helpless. You are guarded by the King whose throne stretches over the heavens and the earth. That is why Ayat-ul Kursi is not just a verse. It is a shield, a defense, a reminder, a declaration, and when spoken with faith, it becomes a barrier no darkness can cross. When you begin to understand spiritual warfare, you realize it doesn't always come with thunder or flashing sign. Most of the time it's subtle. It's in the thoughts that won't let you rest. It's in the sudden heaviness that enters a room. It's in the anxiety that comes out of nowhere. It's in confusion, division, fear, hopelessness, the things you can't quite explain, but you feel them. That's the real battlefield, and that's where Ayat-ul-Kursi doesn't just comfort, it fights. In those unseen realms, where light and darkness are constantly in conflict, this verse acts like a sword drawn in silence. And here's the mystery. It doesn't need emotion. It doesn't need volume. It just needs to be spoken with belief, because when it is, everything shifts. The atmosphere changes. Not because the verse is magic, but because it carries divine authority. It declares that all power belongs to the one who never grows tired, who never sleeps, and who holds every soul in his control. That declaration, in itself, becomes resistance to every form of darkness trying to invade your space. You see, evil can disguise itself. It can hide in small things, in distractions, in delays, in emotional weight. But it can't stand against truth. Truth is what breaks it. Truth is what exposes it. Truth is what drives it out. And that's exactly what Ayat-ul-Kursi does. It doesn't entertain the darkness. It confronts it with reality. A reality where nothing moves without permission from above. A reality where the throne of God still reigns over every detail of your life. That's why this verse is not just meant to be memorized, it's meant to be used. It's a spiritual weapon. Spoken before sleep, it guards your night. Whispered in moments of fear, it brings instant clarity. Recited in times of confusion, it restores balance, because its words don't just inform, they enforce. They call into action the truth of God's dominion over all things, seen and unseen. When Kathryn Kuhlman spoke about the presence of God, she often described it as an invisible blanket that wrapped around you, pushing out every trace of fear and doubt. That same atmosphere descends when Ayat-ul-Kursi is spoken with reverence. It reminds you that you are not alone in the fight, that heaven is not silent, that you don't have to respond to every attack, because some battles are won simply by standing firm in the truth of who your protector is. That's what makes this verse so central in spiritual warfare. It gives you the language of authority without the need for argument. You don't have to convince darkness to leave. You just have to remind it of who's in charge. And Ayat-ul-Kursi does exactly that, line by line, word by word. It doesn't beg for peace, it brings it. It doesn't plead for safety, it proclaims it. It doesn't fear evil, it silences it. So when life feels like a battle and everything in you wants to panic or retreat, speak Ayat-ul-Kursi. Not as a ritual, but as a declaration, as a believer standing on sacred ground, covered not by fear but by truth. Because spiritual warfare is not about shouting louder, it's about standing stronger. And this verse gives you the strength to do just that.